minutes in one more time, and then we'll go ahead and get started. So good morning, everybody. Welcome to our January statewide CTE Advisory Council meeting. It's lovely to see so many faces on the screen. I'm going to go ahead and just do some quick business along with Christy, and then we will sort of jump into our state director updates. But just to let everyone know, we had a few membership changes since our meeting in July. We've had some additions. Lisa Ransom is joining us from the Bureau of Labor and Industry. Clay Martin from the Workforce and Talent Investment Board, and then we were able to recruit a secondary student representative, and that's Pete Sansone? Is that right, Pete?
Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you.
Perfect. Yes, and he's from the Oregon Future Business Leaders of America. And then we did have one switch. Julia Steinberger, Director of STEM Council, has changed positions at the HEC, so we will be waiting for her replacement to add him or her to our advisory group when they are appointed. And another piece of business, we have finalized the charter. So several of you had some feedback on the document, and then I reached out to a few other folks to get some clarification, and pretty much all of the additions, changes should be in the document. And so we're now no longer calling it a draft. It is now the final charter document, and it will be what we use until the leadership team reviews it again. So just for your reference, and then we will also put that up on the website. And if you remember from our last meeting, we developed some group community standards together. And I will let Christy, who led that activity, share her lovely document. And I can share my screen if you'd like me to, Christy, without. Okay, perfect.
That would be fantastic. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. So if you remember back in the fall, we worked together to kind of determine what our meeting norms were going to be. And we did a Jamboard activity, and everyone put ideas up, added stars to those that they agreed with. And so from that document, we took basically all of the ratings, how many stars each of the agreements. And I took about the top 8, I think it's 8 or 9. And this is what we came up with as our shared community agreements. And I started this students at the center was not exactly the top, but I think that we all could agree that that's where everything is starting. So I added them first, and students are at the center of our conversations and decisions every time, every day, especially those who have been most marginalized by our systems. Assume positive intentions and take responsibility for impact. Stay open to new ways of doing things and challenge past assumptions. And challenging the status quo is okay if done respectfully. Everyone has something to contribute. Be a good listener and share space, and balance participation in your speaking and listening to allow for all types of communicators. Listen to understand and be open-minded and aware of your own bias. Be courageous and curious to speak your truth and make space for truths that are different than yours. And ask questions for clarification to avoid making assumptions. And so those were the top. They seem to encompass pretty much all of the other thoughts that were included. And so now we have our agreements that will guide each of our meetings and our subcommittee meetings. Does anyone have any questions, concerns? Great.
All right, thank you, Christy. What I will do is we'll have this document linked at the top of our agendas from here on out. We can also revisit these if we feel like we need to add or change anything on these. But thank you for doing that, Christy.
Thank you.
All right, I think now we'll move into our state director updates. Who would like to go first?
I can go ahead and go first. Welcome, everybody. Janelle Ives. I am the director of the secondary, post-secondary transitions team, and just so excited to hear those community norms. It's just really exciting to have this group here to help advise us, to give us some input, and I think you've created a beautiful structure here. So I'm very excited. I do have a few announcements. Things have changed. Gosh, things keep changing so quickly. As I said, I think we're all going to get tired of change. I know the educators out in our schools are just exhausted right now. Our administrators are exhausted. So I just want to hold space for all the hard work that people are putting in and the real stresses that are on all of our educators and our students' lives right now. But I do have some exciting news as well. So it's good to have some hope and some things to look forward to. And one of the things I want to update you is that Oregon Department of Education, K-12 education, received some ESSER 3 set aside. So it's a big fancy name, just means our federal recovery money. And as part of that, most of it, 90% of that goes out straight to districts. So districts have money to spend, but 10% of it we get to keep in-house and make some priorities for. And 12 million of those funds are going to be used to support career-connected learning in Oregon. They're going to be used for two purposes. One is to create career-connected learning liaisons, navigators, facilitators at the community colleges, and those people will help build bridges between the K-12 school districts, the business and industry, the workforce development centers, the colleges. And so they're really going to help facilitate those relationships in the regions to promote career-connected learning for students. This is really an exciting opportunity. There's a lot of great work already happening. So it's not meant to replace the great work that's happening in some regions, but to enhance and give flexibility to those colleges that already have that. Another piece of that 12 million is going to be expanding career exploration in middle school. So we again know that earlier exposure, exploration in middle school gives us an opportunity to diversify the students that are interested in CTE, diversify their knowledge of all the variety of careers that are available in Oregon. And so we are going to be expanding our career explorations in middle school with a section of this money. We'll be providing open access to all Oregonians to career exploration opportunities. So it'll be an opportunity for the one-stop centers, business and industry, WorkSource, K-12, community colleges to have access to career exploration tools as well. And we also really want to tighten our connections with our tribal, our 9 recognized tribes. So we will be hiring a CTE liaison who will be helping facilitate those career-connected learning opportunities and tighter connections with workforce development in our tribes and guidance activities in our tribal nations across Oregon. So I'm very excited about this investment. It speaks to Oregon's commitment to CTE and to career-connected learning, and it's hopefully going to be a great infusion. This money will be for 3 years, so it'll go through 2024. Along with that, we're also trying to expand our reach of CTE into our communities of color. We know that our Black and African American students participate at a lower rate. We're having a communications campaign that is starting to around February, so in a few weeks here. And I put a link of the timeline. I don't actually have copy yet of the interviews, the ads, but as you can see, if you take an open look into here, we are advertising in some places that typically we have not communicated with students and families in. So we have Hulu, Pandora, we have some print media, you're going to see some radio ads, Spanish language radio ads as well. So it's an exciting opportunity to get more students and families interested and aware of CTE opportunities in the state. And then the final update I want to give, and then I'll open it for some questions if anyone has any, is that the Department of Ed has been working really hard to integrate how districts plan to use their money. So for example, we have a lot of funds that go through the student investment account and high school success to school districts. And we've been working, the CTE team has worked really hard to be part of that process. So as districts plan for how they're going to be spending their SIA, their high school success, their everyday matters, their attendance money, that CTE is a part of that planning process. And they're also thinking about those connections to post-secondary outcomes, to connecting students to jobs and employment, and to planning for their CTE programs in intentional ways, looking at the regional structure we already have and going through our regional coordinators as well as part of that planning process. Okay, so Rosa, you had a question about, is that the positions that will be coming through the career connected learning and the tribal liaison? Those positions will be housed at ODE. We are going through an approval process at the state to get those positions posted. I am hopeful that they will post in March-ish. I can't be too specific because I don't know the approval process, but that's the goal, is that we'll be able to post those internal positions at ODE. The college positions, we hope to get the money to the colleges again in the spring, and hopefully they would be hiring those positions late spring, summertime, for rolling out and being ready to go in the fall.
And the college positions are meant to be a liaison with the high schools?
Liaison, yes. So a liaison for career connected learning opportunities through the high schools, and also connecting with the regional coordinators and the workforce development as well, but housed at the college to build that really tight connection to the colleges.
Thank you.
I kind of wanted to weigh in here, Rosa, too, is we've been talking with the presidents about this for quite a long time. Quite honestly, when I say me and Janelle have talked to the presidents together about this particular piece. We will be doing it through contract. And I know that there might be some angst with regards to some of our friends who are career pathways coordinators or high school partnership directors at the high schools. And the intent is that all three positions would work together in this space, with the recognition that there's more need for additional help in this space. So that's why this is a place that we're focusing in on. And the other thing I want to be clear too is Janelle and I have been in really super close conversation about what these positions will do and how they will support both you at the local level, but help with a statewide piece as well.
Great.
So.
I have zero angst. I was just wanting to give an FYI too,
Okay,
because it sounds exciting to me. So, but
your presidents are excited too.
Yeah. What's the title, just so I can throw it on, so I can send an email out to.
So we haven't. We've been calling them career connected learning coordinators, right, Janelle? That's kind of what we've been calling them.
Navigators to go along with the benefits navigator, I think, which are also, it gets a little confusing. We have a lot of new staff going around.
Okay.
And it's coming out of the HEC associated with CTE in high school. I should be able
No.
to. No. Oh no.
No.
Okay.
So this actually is for really kind of what feels like kind of the first time ever is that ODE will actually be contracting with you to actually place these positions. So it'll be a partnership between your college and the Oregon Department of Education. HEC will stay the heck out of it, except for supporting the actual, implementation and all of that.
Thank you. That's helpful.
Janelle, I just want to echo what one of the other Carlas. I guess I didn't realize there were three of us, so that just makes me excited because I'm never in a room with other Carlas. So this is, I know this is amazing. Think it's time that they start putting our names on license plates at tourist shops. But anyway, one of the questions that I have is if the ODE is basically contracting with the community colleges for these positions, but the regional coordinator, such as ours, is not housed at the community college. That's just another sort of navigational step in the system, and wondered if you have any vision around what that looks like. And maybe you've already talked to Kaylani, but I just want to make sure that, sometimes the different institutions have the people boots on the ground have good intentions, but the institutions have a hard time playing in the same sandbox. So just wondered.
Yeah, you've hit the nail on the head for some of the angst of this, and also some of the strategic reasons for it is to try to intentionally build those connections between colleges, regional coordinators, and workforce development boards. They all have work that touches on one another and is really critical, and the STEM hubs too. But sometimes coordinating that is a challenge across regions. So this person will be supported in making those connections through the state. So we'll have meetings with these people regularly, and we'll be supporting them in building those connections and ensuring that they're making those connections with the regional coordinator wherever they're housed.
So so I think we could definitely share those position descriptions. What they really will look more like, though, is a statement of work, right, Janelle? Because these will be college employees who will be hired to do what is stated in the statement of work in the contract between the Department of Education and the community colleges. So once we get that part of it finalized, I'm sure that we could definitely share that statement of work component with all of you. Do you want me to touch on Future Ready Oregon, Janelle? Okay, great. So many of you may have heard that the governor at the Oregon Business Summit in December announced her new package or reinvented package called Future Ready Oregon 2022. Future Ready Oregon has been something the governor has been working on, but obviously due to the pandemic had to take kind of a secondary role for a little bit. She recently announced that she is looking to invest approximately $200 million in the workforce arena and education arena. And I just wanted to share a little bit of information about that. I do believe that there's a link in the minutes to some information. The investments really are looking at sort of 5 different strategies that I think will be important for all of you to be aware of. Local workforce strategies and service delivery. So that's meeting the local workforce needs and actually providing services to adults and disengaged youth and helping support them in getting additional education and workforce training. There will be an investment for the first time, hopefully, in community college career pathways. On the post-secondary side, career pathways has been actually funded through what's known as a strategic investment from a set aside from the Community College Support Fund. There has never been a line item investment by the legislature in this area, so we're super excited about that. The investment at this point looks to be about 17 million for 3 years. There is also an investment regarding registered apprenticeship and youth re-engagement. So you'll probably be hearing some of information coming out to all of you about that. And then a $10 million investment in credit for prior learning, which I personally am very excited about because we've been working on credit for prior learning for a really long time. And I think that this is a way for us to acknowledge career connected learning at the post-secondary level in a new way. And I say new meaning potentially new to institutions, but credit for prior learning has been around for a long time. In Oregon, we have standards related to that. So this will be supporting institutions and putting together the infrastructure at their institution to be able to award credit for prior learning. So that's quite a bit about Future Ready Oregon. It does need to move through the legislature. So we've been working on that. So I'm sure you'll hear more about it over the course of the next 4 to 6 weeks as we move through the short session. The other thing I wanted to let you know that relates to career technical education is a couple of years ago, the community colleges were granted the ability to offer applied baccalaureates, which are four-year really CTE career-focused degrees. I'm excited to announce that we have our first 2 of those applied baccalaureates moving through the approval process. One coming from Mount Hood Community College, focused on cybersecurity, and the second coming from Chemeketa in management and leadership. We are not through the final approval stages of that, but I wanted you to be aware that there is this next level of CTE pathways that we can be looking to connect with regards to a 4-year trajectory for our students in career technical education. So stay tuned about more information in that area. Our office will be convening a conversation to talk about nursing and applied baccalaureate in nursing because of the healthcare shortage. And I'll keep you posted on that. And then other than that, we have just really been involved in budget and policy option package development because, believe it or not, it's already time for us to be talking about the next biennial budget. So I'm happy to answer any questions about post-secondary and whatever I might be able to answer about the Future Ready Oregon component. And I just want to say, I'm super excited about the partnerships that are building between ODE, HEC, and CCWD, and the potential for what lies ahead at the local level as well. Oh, thank you, Lisa, for putting that in the chat. There's a stakeholder briefing session on Friday, and Lisa put the registration piece in the chat.
Yes, an opportunity where all of the partners who have been a part of the building of the proposal are coming to give a more detailed just summary of the proposal, and an opportunity for you to ask more direct questions as it relates to, you know, to wherever your interest lies.
Okay, thank you for that. I also put that in the meeting notes if you need to find it again. So thank you, Janelle and Donna. If you guys have any questions that pop up later on, please reach out to me and I can get those questions answered for you. So we're going to move on to the next portion of our meeting. If you remember from our last meeting, we got into groups and sort of discussed what we saw as the priorities to address to actualize the vision for CTE in Oregon. And our top 3, if you remember, were equity, alignment, and system for sharing / communication. And those were the 3 subcommittees that we are forming. Several of you have already indicated your interest in being on one of those committees, and a couple of the committees already have meetings scheduled. But what we're going to do today is, since equity was our #1 choice, pretty much everybody had equity down either as their first or second choice. So what we thought we would do is go ahead and start the discussion around equity. And what we thought we would do is sort of mirror what we're hoping the subcommittees will do in their group work. And so we're going to have a presentation today from Karen, is it Moskin?
Yes, Moskin.
You know, if it was Italian, Moscone, you know.
It is Italian, but in America, you know, they change everything.
Okay. So Karen is a part of our CTE equity team at ODE, and she's going to do a presentation for us. And then we're going to get into some groups and do some discussion. And like I said, start to sort of have the conversations that we're hoping will occur in these subcommittees. And we'll talk a little bit more about that, but I'll go ahead and turn it over to Karen for the first part.
Thank you. So I'm trying to share my screen, but can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. So thank you, everyone. It's great to be here. I'm really excited to be a part of this advisory, and I'm super excited that equity is going to be the focus of so much. And it was great to see those agreements and to see that students are centered within all of that. And that's really where we want to keep that focus at the Oregon Department of Education. Then we have an equity stance, which I'm sure you've seen before, but that also reminds us to keep things centered around our students, but specifically around those who are historically or currently marginalized. And so this just is a little bit of a reminder of who those students are. And so these are the students that we serve in Oregon, and you can see that we have a rapidly diversifying population. Move that out of the way. So just to kind of set the stage for us to talk about equity, or maybe even why we have a need for equity in CTE, then I'm going to go back and give us a little bit of a historical perspective. So way back when, it was not called career technical education, but vocational education. And back in the early 1900s, there was a philosophy that drove vocational education that was more about deciding what were people's destinies, what was it that they probably would be able to do, and so that was how they would be fit into what classes or courses they were able to take, which more often than not ended up with students with disabilities, students of color, or students from poor families being tracked off to become the worker bees in the factories, while others were tracked to go on to college and become the owners or the management. Female students, so you might notice in this picture there aren't any of those, because at that time it was not considered appropriate for females to seek a career outside of the home. So that original design of vocational education then became more of a way to teach a specific skill that was geared specifically only to what was available in that community. And so that was the only skill that was taught. And for several decades, that was okay, because there were a lot of jobs that could support a family, even with only a high school education. And, you know, I was surprised when I was researching some of this to learn that in the 1970s, then still about 75% of middle class workers had nothing beyond a high school education. But this was a time when that was really changing, and more training was being required because of the ways that industries were changing. At that same time, there were studies in the 1960s and 70s that showed that students who were in those vocational programs were much more likely to come from lower income families, and found that many times in many school systems, They had an underlying function of funneling students into vocational education as a way to segregate out students to preserve what was considered the academic curriculum for those upper class students, unfortunately. So you can imagine that turned into a bit of an image problem later on, and that vocational programs have and had come to be viewed as a dumping ground for students who maybe weren't succeeding. And this unfortunately included many students of color, also students with disabilities or behavior problems, and other students that maybe were what was considered students that couldn't cut it otherwise. But at the same time, there was more and more and more demand for highly skilled workers. With the new century, then the No Child Left Behind came about legislation. And this legislation changed CTE in that all students had to be tested with the same tests in order for schools to receive federal funds. And so it required a bit of upping the programs, and it required schools actually teaching all of their students the same academic requirements. So that created a big shift. And that's a shift that started with Perkins 4 and has continued on even more so with Perkins 5. And that was that vocational education now, rather than just being what was considered the place where students weren't learning as much, actually is where students are becoming better prepared maybe than others, because they have options. They can be college ready or they could be career ready. And that academics are being integrated into career classes. And so that even the curriculum that's being taught in our CTE classes has more of an academic bent. So that really did flip that story. So up until now, we heard a lot about students that were being forced or required to go into vocational ed, or what then now called CTE. And now, instead, what we find is that we have to look to make sure that there are not barriers being put in order for students to be able to take CTE. So these are just a few of what some of those potential barriers might be right now. And so some of those that we see and just to consider are listed here. These are just a few of them. We sometimes run into quite a few others, but these are maybe what I would say are the top 4 that we seem to be finding with practices within schools. So today, rather than, remember when we talked about how students before were only taught to be able to do one job and that was it? And today that's not the case. And we're providing pathways. So there are many places where students can pivot and turn and change careers, and they're being prepared for all kinds of career opportunities. In fact, now about 1/3 of the people with a certificate make even more than those with a bachelor's degree. And the majority of job openings that are out there now require some of these specific skills and trainings that students actually only develop in CTE programs. So Perkins 5 has all of that in mind and encourages us to really look at and focus on equity in CTE. And part of what they're calling out and saying we need to do is look at data analysis and the way that we fund things and providing technical assistance and professional development, as well as engagement with stakeholders like you. So really happy to have you as a part of that. These are the special populations that Perkins 5 calls out as those that we would have an emphasis on making sure that they are receiving equitable opportunities to participate in CTE programming. So I'm going to start talking at you for a minute and ask you a question. So we have a Jamboard here, and on this Jamboard, and I think that Melinda is going to maybe share the link for the Jamboard in the chat for us. I appreciate she's agreed to monitor the chat for me. But if you could go to the Jamboard and respond to the question of how do you think this history that we just talked about, how do you think this maybe has impacted our CTE ecosystems that we have today? And what might be those challenges and opportunities that are there? So let's look at maybe what are those impacts on our ecosystem today. So is everybody able to access the Jamboard?
I put it in chat. I do see some people joining, but in case you don't remember how to do the Jamboard, if you go into the link and if you go onto the left-hand side, the fourth icon down is a sticky note, and you can click on that, type what you would like, and then when you hit submit, the sticky note should appear on the screen. There's lots of sticky notes, Karen. I don't know if you want to refresh yours, maybe. I don't know if you're trying to show it, or do you want me to share my screen?
You know what? I can share it.
Oh, okay.
I had just moved it over so I could watch it happening.
Oh, okay. No worries. I just thought you were trying to share it.
No, not yet. So,
Okay.
no, this is great. And I'm looking at that and I'm seeing that students might still be funneled by perceived abilities. And I would say, yes, there probably is some of that. Raised awareness for business to engage, absolutely. Inequities that are within the system, yes. I think that when we understand the history, that helps us to understand how this really is something that's systemic and not just on a case-by-case basis. I see others that are talking about this might be impacting the way that we recruit students into CTE courses. And that's an interesting thing to think about, and most definitely a consideration. Changing of bell schedules seems like a surprisingly threatening endeavor for a lot of folks, but changing it can open up access. And that's absolutely right. When we looked at that, that little short list of what were some potential barriers, scheduling is one of those that comes right up to the top. And if we can just look at some of those practices that have been in place forever and see how we can change them, it's amazing what that can open up. So thank you to who shared that one. I see what are the best bell schedules. I wish that we could say there's a magic bullet that says if you have this bell schedule, then everything's gonna be equal. And it really is kind of a case by case and school by school scheduling situation. So it's something to think about. But in some cases, if there are only in a high school, only 6 hours available for taking, so that there's only a place for one elective course, and then students are required to go into pull-out classes, that would mean that anyone who's in a pull-out language or special needs class would never, ever be able to take CTE. So some of those kinds of things are things to think about, is how is the scheduling impacting what's happening with our students? Sorry. Okay. Thank you very much. Please continue to add to the Jamboard because that's something we can look at throughout the presentation. These are really great responses. So within ODE, we have an equity, diversity, and inclusion team for all of the agency. But within our secondary, post-secondary transitions team, or the CTE team, we also have an equity team in place to help meet the equity goals that are part of our CTE state plan. And I know that Melinda and Donna talked to you about the state plan and about these goals. So I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about that now, but there may be other times when we can talk about what are some of the strategies and some of the activities that we're doing around that. But today, what I really wanted to do was talk to you a little bit more about a program that we have within CTE as a requirement, a federal requirement, that I don't think many people know about. So this is a great week to think about civil rights. This was our Dr. King's birthday, which was a great time to think about the civil rights movement and all that people have done in order to have civil rights within our country. So what comes to your mind when you think about civil rights? So feel free to go ahead and put in the chat, maybe something that comes to your mind when you hear about civil rights. Collective effort. The work is not done. We absolutely do have a long way to go. That's right. There's still so much to do, and it is a collective effort in order to do that. Social justice, yes. Voting rights, yes, that's a big one right now, isn't it, that we're thinking about? Absolutely. So within education, there are some federal civil rights laws that schools are responsible for making sure that they're following those laws and making sure that they're providing those opportunities for students. So those laws are listed here. Title VI is the one that we normally think of because that was the one that first came out of the civil rights movement in the 1960s. So that was passed in 1964, and it focuses on making sure that there's no discrimination on the basis of race, color, or national origin. And within schools, when we talk about national origin, that also includes languages. So that would include students who come from other countries or students who come speaking languages other than English. In 1972, the Title IX legislation was passed, and Title IX was known for a long time just only about athletics, but really since then there's been a lot more that has been brought to light and changed. And so Title IX provides protections around discrimination on the basis of sex and gender, sexual orientation, and gender identity. Section 504 is one that when I'm speaking to educators, usually that's the one that they feel like they're the most familiar with because they think about students who are on 504 plans. Section 504 was passed in 1973, and it's really the Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act, which means that we provide coverage of making sure that there's no discrimination for persons on the basis of disabilities. And then in 1991, Section 504 was updated a little bit, or we had an addition to it with the ADA, or the Americans with Disabilities Act. And that made it, Section 504 is for those who have received federal funds, but the ADA actually is for any kind of public accommodations. So that made a big change. And then there were other things in the ADA like service animals or how your website looks or some of those kinds of things that are also included within the ADA under the umbrella of Section 504. Now, this last one is probably one that you haven't heard of before, but it's the one that actually is where we in CTE are given a charge that we need to make sure that these other 4 laws are being implemented in our schools and that students are being protected and not discriminated against. So those were passed in 1979 as a result of a couple of court cases where after Title VI was passed, then there should not have been any more segregation in schools. But the NAACP brought a court case to what was then the Housing, Education, and Welfare, HEW, department and said, we're seeing that you're still segregating students or that you're still providing federal funds to schools who are. And they took that to court and they won. And so then the court said, okay, stop doing it. Well, a few years later, the NAACP came back and said, that wasn't enough. You told everybody to stop doing it. they didn't stop doing it. They're just making it so that it's a little more sneaky. So what they're doing is saying that they have vocational education and are funneling students into those vocational education programs. And we're seeing a disproportional representation of students of color, students with disabilities, and then also even within sex and gender. Because I don't know if I'm old as dirt, so I can tell you that I remember what school was like in the 1970s, because I was in the junior high school and all of the girls were required to take home ec and all of the boys were required to take shop. And so it was also that we were being forced based on sex and gender as well. So because of that, then these guidelines were passed that say that we need to go to schools and make sure that these laws are being put into place, and especially when it comes to vocational education, because it's so important for our students to be able to participate. In Oregon, we also have a civil rights bill, and I think we can be proud because in 1953, that was 11 years before Title VI was first passed, and Oregon was the 21st state to outlaw discrimination in public places. Right now, the current definition of discrimination is anything that differentiates treatment, so different treatment. And then I've underlined and italicized this, intended or unintended, because quite often folks will say, well, we didn't mean it that way. And it's very, very important to understand that it isn't how you meant it, but what it did to other people. So that impact of what it did to the communities or the students, that's what we need to look at when we're talking about civil rights, not necessarily what someone meant. So any act that's fair in form but discriminatory in operation would be something that's considered to be within that same realm. And then all of that's based on our 10 protected classes in Oregon, which are listed there. Age, disability, national origin, race, color, marital status, and religion are specific to Oregon, sex, sexual orientation, and gender identity. So I'm going to give you a scenario. That's just a quick scenario about what might be happening. And in fact, any of these scenarios that I ever share are things that really have happened in Oregon. But during a visit to a local high school, a counselor comments that he's tired of changing schedules for so many emergent bilingual students that week. And emergent bilingual students are students who are just learning English or learning to use English, becoming bilingual. He explains that the students are dropping out of a CTE manufacturing class. So either feel free to unmute yourself or else put in the chat, does this raise any concerns for you? Just this conversation so far. Would you have any concerns about what is happening here? Carla says she's 100% concerned. One of the 4 Carlas with a C, Carla Gay.
And I'll just add that I'll unmute myself because I can't type fast enough. I hear this a lot as we look at our master bell schedule, excuse me. And what we're hearing is that if they are on an IEP or they are emergent bilingual, because of the other requirements for services, and if there is not a push-in model into their core content or universal design, it ends up being that they get double booked, this is at the high school level, for courses, which means that it significantly reduces the number of electives they have access to. And then if our schools, when the students forecast, let's say you're a sophomore, you're a rising sophomore, and you are emergent bilingual, you have to be in your sophomore English class, you have to be in an English language class, and now you have 1 elective left. And so if you forecast for that, but our schools don't hand schedule you in first, what happens is they plug all the kids who forecast into their preferred courses, and it bumps those kiddos out because the courses that they want get filled first. So it's a very technical thing, but it has huge equity issues. And unpacking that with the people in the buildings who actually build the master schedule and actually plug kids into courses is very detailed and really requires some professional learning and conversation around how you do that in an equitable manner. Our district is really struggling with changing that practice because it takes more time up front. And whereas typically they plug them into Synergy, they all get scheduled, and then they go on the back end and try to plug holes by hand scheduling. So they schedule the 70% of kids first and then address our special ed and EL kids. But then if courses are already full, they just try to plug in holes. So what happens is freshmen and sophomore students often get put into classes that they have zero interest in being in for their elective. And then they don't want to be there in the first place. And then, you know, it's all of the other things like, are they engaged? Is the teacher somebody dynamic? Do they care about the content? But the first thing is we're putting them into classes that they did not have interest in the first place because we're filling holes. And what I have said is we need to schedule our special ed, our EL kids, our kids who maybe struggled in middle school first, and then run the 70% of everybody else. And so that's a very technical fix. But those are the issues that are baked into systems of whiteness and white supremacy culture and oppression, and it creates tracking. So I just wanted to say that because this is a very real issue right now in our district.
Thank you so much, Carla. It absolutely is a very real issue all over. And I think that you named it very well and talked about how difficult sometimes that scheduling is, but mostly because of systemically what's baked into the system to make that happen. And so how that sometimes can be difficult to recognize. So very well said. Thank you very much for that. There also were some other people in the chat that are asking about maybe language issues or biases, or is it a hostile environment perhaps for students? So either way, we're going to investigate it a little bit more. And when we did look deeper into this, we learned that all of the students in the class were being required to take a safety test in week 4. And if they did not pass the test, they were not allowed to work with any of the equipment in the class. The test is only offered in English. And when asked about it, the instructor said, well, that's because the emergency instructions are only listed on the machinery in English. And so they needed to be able to pass that in English. So now my question for you is this a violation of civil rights law? What would you do if you were aware of the situation in your local school or in a school that you were visiting? Or what could the school possibly do to rectify? So you can feel free to respond to any or all of those questions. You can do that in the chat, or else feel free again to unmute and share your thoughts. So think about our definition of discrimination. And where we talked about if you have different treatment based on one of those protected classes. And national origin was one of those protected classes. That would be what we're talking about when it comes to language, is that falls within national origin. So I see the provide the test and the instructions in multiple languages as an option. Thank you, Kyle. Absolutely. Information and exams other than English. Add labels on the machines in a different language. It doesn't have to just only be in English. There are a lot of ways. Are there any other ways besides a written test that students could demonstrate their ability to be safe with machinery? So there really are a lot of other options, but sometimes, just like Carla did such a great job of expressing to us, is that sometimes we are so trapped in what we've done for so long within the system that we work in, that it's hard to see these other options or these other ways to address that situation. So as Carla says, yeah, it is a violation. It's a violation if we're treating students differently based on their national origin or the language that they speak. And that it's going to require doing some work to help folks understand that there are ways to change. One of the questions that when we go into schools that we ask is, do students know what to do if they feel like they're being discriminated against? Would they know who to talk to? If you knew of a student being discriminated against in your community, would you know who to talk to? Would you know where to take that complaint? Or do you know if you did, what would happen as a result? So legally, these are all things that schools are required to make it so that we're easily accessing those in multiple languages of their community. So these are some of the things that when we look for, we look to make sure that students are able to know what to do in order to find that help. So that brings us to the methods of administration program, which goes back to that, remember that 1979 law that I told you was passed that's specific to vocational education. And so we're required to visit a certain number of schools every year and do a really full-on extensive audit of all of those civil rights laws to make sure that students are receiving the opportunities that they need to receive, and that they have access to programs, and that they have the ability to thrive within that. So we conduct these compliance investigation reviews. Who we visit 10 high school systems every year and 1 community college. And Luis Juarez is here, and he's also on our MOA team with community colleges. So hi, Luis, nice to see you there. But people might say, what do we mean by a high school system? It's there might be middle schools with CTE classes feeding into a particular high school. There might be alternative schools or programs where students go, or any other associated schools or programs that are part of the students that would be within that school, the system of that one particular school. And for these purposes, CTE counts as any offering of 2 consecutive career technical education classes that don't have to be specific to Perkins. So it's not necessarily only Perkins classes that we're thinking about. And when we go into schools, we don't just look at the CTE programs. We look at everything that a CTE student would be taking within a school, because just like we talked about, scheduling or other things could impact whether or not a student is able to even take those CTE courses or participate in those courses. So we look at all things within the school. The way that we choose who we visit is, like we said, we have to look at data. So this is a list of all of the data that we review. We really focus on whole school student populations and then special student populations within the school and within CTE. So let's say, for example, 50% of the students within the school population are students of color. But then when we look in CTE, we see that 10% of the students in CTE are students of color. That would be an enrollment discrepancy. And so those are what we look at, and we pull those discrepancies, add them up together and rank schools according to those discrepancies. And then based on size categories of schools, that's who we choose to visit. We also look at this other data that's available publicly, and that helps us to try to pinpoint where we might be most likely to find discrimination. It doesn't mean that just because it's like that, that there is discrimination. It's just part of the selection process. Once we're there, we, like I said, look at all kinds of things. These are the things that we look at. We go into the school, we interview students, we interview staff, we look at scheduling data. We go through the all of the buildings and do full-on ADA accessibility. We look at their data that they have and their plans. We look at individual student IEPs. We talk about how students receive those services. There's a long checklist, and if any of you are interested in looking at what that checklist is, it's available on our website, and I'll show you at the end where you can see that. Or I'm also happy to send those to you. So how it works is, like I said, we interview students and staff, we review the documents, all of the policies and procedures that the school has. We review the facilities that students use, including parking lots and the routes that go between buildings. Our team discusses those findings and commendations. And all along the way, we have people from the school with us so that they're a part of our team. We don't feel like we're there to act upon somebody, but we do it as a partnership with them so that they know what we're looking for. And that way, when when it's in the future, they continue to provide that equity. And so we continue to do that. And also, after the visit, they will receive a letter of findings and some suggested ways to fix those. We'll work together to come up with a voluntary compliance plan and set dates to have that done. They laugh at me because we call it voluntary compliance, because it isn't like they can say we volunteer to not do it, but it's that we get to volunteer to talk about how we're going to do it and by when we're going to do it. And then we actually have to send a report into the Office for Civil Rights at the U.S. Department of Education every 2 years, letting them know what we've been doing, who we've been visiting, and where we are with monitoring and correcting those actions. So you can see that there's a lot to it. So now that you've had a little bit of that background, here's another scenario. If you went to a high school and they just added some really great new equipment, because we have some fabulous programs. And in this particular manufacturing program, the classes were all offered in a loft area that was up above the workshop. And it was only accessed by climbing up a set of stairs. Within that class, there were 2 students in wheelchairs who couldn't climb the stairs. And so they received instruction by watching it on their computer screen while the other students were in the classroom. Do you think this is a potential violation of civil rights laws? I'm seeing people nod their heads, and the answer would be, yeah, it's not providing comparable experiences for students with disabilities. There's a big difference between being in class and being able to manipulate and work with the equipment, and another one to watch somebody else do it while you're on a screen. So definitely that would be something that could be problematic. What could the school do instead to provide equity? It looks like you're talking, Carla A, but you're muted. So I'm saying build a ramp, install an elevator, provide access to the classroom, or even move the classroom. In this case, it was an old building and they didn't have the ability to do any of those changes, but they were able to move the classroom to another room across the hall instead. So these are just some stats to let you know what we've done in the last 8 years. We've visited 32 school districts, 14 community colleges, over 100 buildings, secondary buildings, and 250 post-secondary buildings, and have been altered to be ADA compliant. That includes over 280 parking lots and thousands of documents. The best part is interviewing over 750 students, because they really do help us to understand what's happening within CTE. We also have been able to look at wonderful, wonderful CTE programs across the state. We always include commendations in all of our reports that we send to the US Department of Education, because we feel like Oregon really has some amazing CTE programs. And that's part of why we want to make sure that they're available to our students. The other thing that we do is we provide ongoing technical assistance for schools or for consortiums or for any others who are interested. So just letting you know that those are some of the things that we do to help with these equity issues. And as Carla said, a lot of times it requires a lot of professional development to be able to understand how to change some of the processes and procedures that we do have in schools. Finally, these are just some links for ideas and resources for those that might be interested. This one at the bottom, resources, will take you to the ODE website. And if you go down to the bottom right, then you'll see that's where the equity and civil rights link is. So I feel like I've been talking a lot. I would like to know if you have any questions for me at this time. Well, thank you so much. I'm looking forward to continued opportunities to participate within the equity discussions that we have on this advisory. And so I'm now going to stop sharing my screen and turn the time back over to Melinda. Thank you again.
Thank you so much, Kieran. It is time for a quick break, so we'll go ahead and take 5 minutes. According to my phone, it is 10:07. So if everybody's back at 10:12, that would be great. And then we'll talk a little bit more about what we're going to do next. So I'll see you in 5. You're getting a lot of love in the chat, Karen.
Thanks for letting me present today. I really appreciate it.
We appreciate you being here.
I'm happy to be on the advisory.
Hey, Melinda, there's another steering committee going on right now. I think Janelle's in that one. Do you need me to stay here for this or?
No,
are
it's
you
going to be
thinking
basically group discussions. So yeah, they're going to
Okay.
go off and start talking about the things and sort of mirroring what we're hoping the subcommittees will do in their
Okay.
meeting. So yeah.
Okay, and I know I'm signed up for a subcommittee and have a meeting on my calendar that I'll
Perfect.
be at. So, okay, I just wanted to check in before I left this and went to that. So
Yeah, no, I appreciate it, Donna. Thanks for coming.
thank you. Have a great day and thanks
too.
for organizing all of it.
Sure.
Bye.
Bye.
Hi, Belinda. Can you see me?
I can.
Hi, I'm Celia Nunez. I just saw Donna. I'm Donna's new deputy director.
Oh, hi,
For-
Celia. Yes, nice to
Hi.
meet you.
Nice to finally meet you.
Yeah.
But I literally ran to my computer and she just logged off. But I just want to let you know that I'm on as well.
Okay.
Listening. It's a great presentation. Karen's doing great. But when I saw your name, I thought, oh, there she is. I better just pop in and just say hi.
Yeah, it's nice to meet you. I know you started, but we didn't have an opportunity yet to meet. So I'm glad you're here. I'm glad
Yeah.
Donna must have forwarded it to you. I can add you to all of this.
Would you mind?
Yes, I can.
Yeah. Would you mind? What she's trying to do, Melinda, is she's trying to basically have me. This is my 3rd week, so so it's a lot of learning. But what she's trying to do is she's been forwarding me meetings for me to kind of like just attend and be in the background and learn and listen and kind of see who the people are. And then she's intentionally going to start okay, you're going to be attending these meetings on our behalf. And I don't recall honestly about the statewide advisory. I think she's going to have both of us. But I've seen your name on several things, and I was thinking, oh my gosh, I've got to just take the opportunity to introduce myself. So it's good to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. Yes, I was going to reach out, but I was going to give you a little bit of time to sort of settle in.
Yeah, I look forward to it. Definitely send me a calendar invite
Will do.
or maybe a couple of dates and times that I can consider. And then I'd love to just kind of, have a one-to-one to just kind of hear from you and start kind of, learning some of the workings behind the scenes.
Sure, absolutely. We'll do that.
All right. Thanks, Melinda.
Sure. Okay, according to my phone and my computer, it's 10:12. So I'm the only face I see though. Oh, there's another one. Yay. Okay, great. As people are starting to come back. So now we're going to move into, kind of what we're hoping will be sort of the opportunity for you all to start talking with one another. So if you look at the meeting, the rolling meeting minutes, what we're hoping will happen in these subcommittees. So if you can imagine, this group only meets 4 times a year. We have, right now it's only 2 hours long because we don't want folks to have, Zoom fatigue. Hopefully, if we get back to in person soon, we'll have maybe longer meetings because we'll want to make it worth your while to come and meet in person if we get to that point. But if you can imagine only meeting 4 times a year, 2 hours at a time, we can't actually get a lot of work done, right? But we want this group to be able to dig deeper into the research, what's going on, what potential strategies, best practices we could look at, and making recommendations that we could potentially implement. And so what we're hoping the subcommittees will do is get that opportunity to dig deeper into these topics. And so what we're hoping will happen is that each subcommittee will talk about the issues and concerns in that particular area, as well as, kind of dig into some of those root causes of those issues and concerns. Then we're hoping they will move into what's currently being done in the state, right? And so, utilizing the breadth of knowledge of the people that are on the subcommittees, but maybe also reaching out, right, to folks from ODE or HEC or other entities across the state to find out what is currently being done to address some of those issues and concerns. And then also kind of honing in on the areas for growth, and then looking at some best practices and strategies that we could look at implementing. And so then I'm hoping that the group will sort of create a list of recommendations and then bring those back to the larger committee for discussion. And then maybe having the group settle on 1 or 2, or 3 strategies that they would then recommend to the state directors for implementation. And then the hope is that that subcommittee will also then be part of implementing the recommendations that get selected. So that is what we're hoping the subcommittee work will look like. And so we're sort of mirroring that a little bit today. So Karen did a wonderful presentation for us to sort of get us started, what some of those issues and concerns are, and talking about some of the stuff that is being done in the state, specifically at ODE and HEC. So just, kind of getting you started there. So now what we're wanting the group to do is sort of move into answering some of these other questions. So I'm going to share my screen real quick, and we're going to get you into some breakout rooms. And we're going to do some group brainstorming. And what I'm hoping will happen is that I'll put you into groups, I think 4 groups, I think is what I've set up. And then we'll have you get into those groups and talk about what other things are currently being done in Oregon to address equity and CTE, right? So we just talked a little bit about what ODE and HEC are doing. What are your organizations doing? What are your within your sphere of influence, what's happening? So you can kind of share that list and help us start to create that list of what's going on. Talking about what are the areas for growth? What are some best practices and strategies that you're aware of that we should consider? And then out of all of that, start to talk about maybe what some recommendations you would have for us to address equity in CTE. And then you'll designate someone to add your thoughts to your slides. and then maybe a spokesperson who can talk about the highlights. So every group will have 2 slides. So for example, this is breakout room 1, slide 1, first 2 questions. Breakout room 1, slide 2, second 2 questions. And I've sort of delineated so you can kind of see a little bit of a difference in the color scheme so you can find your slides faster. But so I'm going to put you guys into groups and you guys can start discussing. So I'm going to stop share. I see chat in case somebody has questions real quick before I send you. Awesome, thanks, Pete. So I'm going to go ahead and put you guys into groups. You guys can start talking. So let me do that. Any questions on the directions before I do that? I will also put the links to the slide in the chat. It is in the notes, but I'll put another link in there for everyone. So, okay. You should get an invitation.
Hi, Melinda.
Hi, Carla. With a C.
So, yeah, sorry, I have a counselor job alike that I'm going in between, and so
No worries. If you, yeah, no problem. If you have anything that you would like to add to these, or just make sure gets included, because what my hope is that I will compile all these for the equity subgroup. And honestly, I'm sorry, I don't remember which one you were on right now, but so that group will have all of these things to get them started. So if you have anything that you'd like to add or anything you'd like that group to consider, please just reach out.
Okay. Yeah, I think I'm on the equity subgroup.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, I am, because they have another meeting already. So, yeah. So I think I might rejoin you. Like, I have their voice and I have yours coming in each year. So I might rejoin you back. It's all the same computer. But I feel like I want to give some attention to them because we're talking about LGBTQ students and supporting them in our schools. So, and I oversee our counselors and social workers. So I'm going to go join them, but I am following the slide deck, and then I can always follow back up with you. By the way, I love your quilt. Did somebody make that, or did you make that?
So I did. It's not a full quilt because I don't know how to sew very well. So I needed my mother's help. But yes, it is a wall hanging.
Oh my God, I love it. I mean, because I have t-shirts of my mom's, and I have wanted to make something like that forever.
Yeah.
Is it just the t-shirt shown together, or is there a backing?
There is a backing. Yes.
I love it.
I'm not the best sewer, but my mother actually made me a quilt that I use as a blanket. And then I had more shirts. I'm like, what am I going to do with those? And so I decided to try my hand at sewing. So yes, they are the shirts. I cut them, sew them together, had some help from my mom, but yeah. So.
Okay, I'm going to do that. I have like a boxes. My mom died like over 20 years ago, and I still have all these boxes. And I keep thinking I'm going to make them to give quilts to my kids. Yeah. And it's 20 years later.
I have stuff in my garage. I'm like, I'm gonna make a quilt for my kids, but I'm like, I might want to learn how to sew before I do.
Yeah, I do know how to sew. It's the time, but I love it.
That too.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Melinda.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Bye.
All right, welcome back, everybody. I hope nobody got cut off. I tried to do a countdown. I know breakout rooms are tough sometimes. But I hope you all had a chance to get some good discussion in. What I wanted to just provide was an opportunity for each group to share a couple of things or clarify something that you feel maybe needs to be clarified from your slide, because I am going to provide all of this information to the equity subgroup. So does someone from group one want to share a couple highlights or clarify anything that's written on their slide? The slides, plural. You were supposed to designate somebody to be your speaker.
We had a note taker, but we did not designate a speaker.
Okay. It's okay if you don't want to share, and hopefully your slides are self-explanatory and the equity group can just take them and run.
Group 4 has a speaker ready to go.
All right, let's go with group 4.
Yeah, I'll start us off. So a couple things to clear up maybe. On slide 1, we talked about looking at bell schedules to address equity. And that's just kind of changing the schedule around to allow more time for CTE classes, because with some English learners having to take those classes, English classes, and if you have honors classes, you don't have that much time to take these CTE courses. And then we also talked about, in an area for growth, having a centralized place where districts can send documents for reliable translation, because currently a lot of schools only send stuff out in English and Spanish when there's many more languages that are spoken, and having a place maybe at ODE or somewhere like that that can take these documents and translate them into many different languages would help reach those different families. We also discussed, for best practices or strategies, a CTE wheel or survey class that is required. So making these CTE classes a graduation requirement, and having one that covers multiple like CTE aspects, so that you're forced into things you might not have thought about taking, as well as things you are interested in, and that can show you maybe you really enjoy something you had never considered before, or maybe you don't like something you were thinking about. And this would also give like freshmen the introduction to CTE and experience in that aspect. For kind of advertising CTE courses in high school, a lot of kids don't really want homework, and some CTE courses don't have homework. So we could use that as an marketing strategy. At the same time, that helps students who have work after school, because many students do have to work after school or take care of siblings. That would help them and relieve stress, which would move back towards an equity stance. And then looking at recommendations we have for addressing equity. I personally don't know many students who even know what CTE is. They are taking these CTE courses, but they don't really know what they're doing or what it's for. And just really communicating maybe in a newsletter to parents or students what CTE is and its benefits can help expand its recognition. But that also goes back to the equity issue with these newsletters primarily only being sent out in English and Spanish. And again, having to translate that as well. So there's this mix of having these resources that improve recognition while also addressing the equity problems, so that multiple populations can understand the benefits.
Great, thank you, team 4. How about 2 or 3? Does anybody have anything they'd like to share? Marcy.
Hi, I'm the spokesperson for Team 2. So we're a group comprised of community colleges, some workforce, so that was kind of our focus. And heck, and Ben, I'm not sure where you were from exactly, PBS. But we focused a lot on some of the challenges. It's really that communication between, you know, there's talk of equity within each of our organizations, you know, hiring diverse workforce or, you know, reducing barriers. A lot of community colleges have support services and students. ROSA directly works with a lot of students with barriers. And so there's people and talk about it. It's just putting it into action is the challenge. And so we talked about, you know, some things we do well as search advocates on hiring committees, you know, making sure we're doing equitable hiring of staff. We also talked about, you know, trainings, you know, a lot of people have diversity and equity trainings. However, there is a gap in terms of actually applying that and really looking hard at our systems or our processes and understanding how to apply that in the real world. So one of our solutions was to potentially, like when Karen was presenting those scenarios of things that she finds in high schools that are issues, it's like, I think staff and committees would benefit from training more like that. How do we see those gaps in our understanding of what is equitable? How are we putting those barriers in place without even realizing those accessibility barriers? And so having a more scenario-based training was kind of one proposal idea where we can look at ourselves in a different way. And so that was one. And also, you know, all CTE programs require advisory councils that meet regularly and that talk about curriculum and learning outcomes and skills. But perhaps what we can add to that agenda for those advisory committees is addressing equity and barriers and how we're going to, you know, adapt and promote more equitable hiring, training. We also talked about some solutions around coordinating those transitions, you know, between the training facility and the hiring. You know, can we participate in training and onboarding for advocacy for those with disabilities? Because we know employers have a demand to hire and a shortage of employees, but yet there's some balking at hiring people with barriers. And so how can we show or communicate or help those students advocate in a different way that promotes that equity and that workforce that is so desperately needed? They are fully capable and skilled. It's just making those connections and reducing those stereotypes. So those were some of our areas. Hopefully I summarized that well enough.
Thank you, Marcy. You did great.
Thank you, Marcy.
Anyone from group three, I think.
Group 3 talks a lot about the impact of rules like the federal marijuana or the state marijuana laws and impact on hiring, the importance of businesses understanding that the changing demographic and the needs of a younger workforce regards to like raising their children and having that work-life balance, and so that kind of cultural shift with those folks. We talked about the difference between policy and practice. So, you know, do as I say, not as I do kind of thing. And then talked about some good successful programs like NAEP, pre-apprenticeship, Job Corps Scholars, STEP program, you know, funding that's available to get folks into trades-related programs. opening the door for folks. So lots of conversation around barriers, and then some good celebration of strategies that are working, and with a recognition that we really need to do more for our people with disabilities to help them be able to access these fantastic careers. And then sometimes businesses don't understand ADA law, and that there are supports available through like folk rehab and other agencies. So it's not the onus of responsibility, and the cost is not all on the employer. So doing some education there.
Awesome. Thank you. So I appreciate all the conversation. Again, we're going to give this to the equity subcommittee so they can this is kind of kickstarting that group to give them a lot of material to work with. And, hopefully they can have discussions and maybe some of the areas we didn't delve as far into. And then hopefully at some point they will bring back a list of potential recommendations to the larger group, and we can talk about which of these we want to implement first. And then we will have Donna and Janelle let us know which ones they'd like us to start working on. So hopefully that's the way this will work. And again, the 3 subcommittees are listed in our rolling minutes. I also have put in the subcommittee list in case you maybe forgot, because that was back in December, and I know lots of things happened since then, but just in case you couldn't remember which subcommittee you were on, but hopefully you've all been contacted for those of you that signed up for a subcommittee, and those groups are starting to meet, and we'll start doing some of this work. And then bring things back to us. A couple things I just want to point out: if you don't already have an ex officio council member as part of your subcommittee, don't hesitate to reach out to them. That's part of why they're here. So do reach out to them for additional support, resources, answering some questions, that kind of thing. So pointing you in the right direction. So they can also help in that subcommittee work. Any quick questions about subcommittee before I move quickly to good of the order? Scanning all the faces just to make sure. Okay. All right. So just a quick some quick announcements for the good of the order. Don't forget, you are also welcome to put things in this when we send out that, you should always have this link, and you're welcome to add things to that for our meetings. Just to let you know, when we changed our name from the advisory group to the advisory council, we changed our website address. So I just want to make sure that you have that new link in case you're sending anyone there. We do try to keep our membership list updated. One other thing I wanted to point out about membership, and I went ahead and linked this in the top where I talked about some of the membership changes up at the first topic from today. I linked the advisory council slides there, so you can go in and sort of read about our membership. I separated them out into our selected members and our ex officio members. If you don't have a slide, please make one. If you're new, please go in and read about everyone else along with creating one if you don't have one. So just wanted to remind you on that piece. And then a couple of other things that people wanted to make sure that people are aware of, that the Portland Public Schools future U2Go sessions, and that they're open to basically everyone. So if you're interested in seeing or learning a little bit more about those, there's a link for those. And then also the National Skills Coalition opened up their registration for free this year, and it's virtual. So it's an opportunity to get some more information, learn a little bit more about what's going on specifically in higher ed. So put that link there as well. Are there any other quick announcements or things that folks wanted to share in our last 3 minutes?
Just a big thank you to you, Melinda, as always, for all your hard work with this and keeping it running. It's so awesome.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it. And I appreciate all of your participation and upcoming subcommittee work, because that's kind of where most of this stuff's going to get done. So I appreciate your participation in those. All right, well, I'll give you 2 minutes back in case you have another meeting right after this. Our next meeting will be April 20th from 9 to 11. And if any subcommittees have questions or want to reach out, please just reach out to me and I'll help. I'm going to try to be involved in all of them, but I don't know if I'll be able to go to every single meeting, but you're welcome to reach out if you have questions. All right, goodbye, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks all. Bye.
Thanks,
Thank you,
everyone.
everybody.
Thanks, Karen.